really, really hoped that we learned during the pandemic that transactional isn't the value. It's not watching the video that makes a college education, right? Like it's not sitting online getting the information. It's learning how to learn and reflect and engage and interact and really think deeply. And we don't do that as a passive audience.
They're craving advice, mentorship, and relationships. They don't always know that, but that is why they are here. They really want those relationships and role models. And if college doesn't have that, instead, if it's like, do your homework and I'll give you an 85, students are going to ask why they're paying for that.
Today's going to be a great day. I'm happy to join you. Thank you, Dr. Sherry Woosley, joining us in just a minute. But Google searches, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So my first one, this happened today. I had to look this up. There's a term, if you're in the CIA, which is PNG'd. And I was like, what does that mean? PNG'd.
Can you tell us what it means?
It means when you've been identified and kicked out, persona non grata.
Okay.
So, okay, didn't know that. My other search was Rate My Professor search, which came from my son saying that he found me on Rate My Professor. I was like, let's take a look and see what that says. My third is Maverick McIver.
Quarterback for ACU back in the day.
What was that? No, he still is.
He is?
Yeah. So Maverick was.
Hold on one second. Can we all just appreciate this name, Maverick McIver? His parents get a gold star. Like that kid was born to be a quarterback. Okay.
He was. Go. He was. His dad played quarterback at University of Texas. I didn't know that.
Oh.
But Maverick was at Texas Tech and then transferred, never started, but then transferred to ACU.
Okay.
Where this weekend he just played Tech and almost beat them.
Yeah. By 1 point in overtime, we lost. So it was pretty incredible.
Anyway, it's a fun story.
It's Maverick, a great name.
Number 4, ocelots. Did you know that there are ocelots in South Texas?
Ocelot's like a ferret. Is it like a little furry
thing?
Yeah.
It's a cat. It's a cat. I mean, it's like a bobcat-sized cat. Yeah.
Oh, so not so cute. They could eat you.
No, they're beautiful. They're amazing, but I don't think they're friendly.
Okay.
And then number 5, both ocelot and my last one come from my friend Dylan, and some really interesting conversations. But why cummerbund pleats? He asked me if I knew why, and I told him, and he
doubted you.
Kind of making fun of me. But then if you search for it, I was right.
Okay, I'll have to search for it. That's good. Give us a list of things to do. All right, mine are not very good this week. First of all, I searched for Only Murders in the Building. I've just started watching. I'm late to the bandwagon, but it's really good. I like it, except there's a lot of swearing. So just there's my warning.
I'm sorry. This is a show on Netflix, or
I think it's on Hulu.
Okay.
Next, I searched for the slamming the car door prank, which is a prank where people slam the door as they're saying goodbye to their significant others, and they about lose their mind. So that's a good one.
Listen, my sister, I probably shouldn't have said who, but my sister just slammed my door, and I was like, what? Are you mad at me?
It wasn't a prank, huh? Also, I searched for shave and haircut 2 bits. I don't know why. I was racking my brain why I needed to search for that, but I think maybe Lillian and I were talking about it, and I was like, this is where. So I don't know. 2 more. This one's embarrassing. The Toto toilet.
Is it Toto or Tutu?
It's TOTO.
Uh-huh.
So I read somewhere someone talking about this very expensive toilet, and I was like, how expensive could it be? $6,000.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know what it does. Once I saw $6,000, I was like, forget it. I'm out. So that's entertaining. And then the last one, Matt, I thought I was losing my mind because I have been saying relationship constellations forever. And I know it comes from this book, which Sherry and I are going to talk about today, Relationship Rich Education, right?
Yeah.
Scoured the book, could not find relationship constellations in it. Am I losing my mind? I did find mentoring constellations, which I was like, okay. But then I Googled relationship constellations and no, Google's like that. Those two things have not been put together.
You made it up.
I guess I made it up. They returned family constellations, which is like a systems thing you do. And then also they returned some like zodiac constellations, like who you were in another life. That's not what we're talking about. So I guess I should trademark relationship constellations.
Yeah.
Pretty good when you make up something and Google's like, no one's ever said that before. I'm still a little, I need to do some more research, but all right.
Maybe Sherry can help you out with that.
Yeah, maybe so.
You may have something to say about that.
Okay, can you do your curiosity facts for us today?
Sure. Yeah. So, last time we talked about clouds. So this is brain candy. It comes from National Geographic. Just things to be curious about. Today, I'm talking about water. And as you know, water is everywhere. It points out almost 3/4 of Earth's surface is covered in water. And my grandfather said, that's the way the world was made. That means we should be fishing that much time.
3/4 of the time.
Of your life. Yeah.
All right.
The human brain is 75% water.
Interesting.
I didn't know that. And a thunderhead cloud can hold more than 2 billion pounds of water, which is different than an average cumulus cloud.
Yeah.
Which we talked about.
The weight of clouds, honestly, has been pretty staggering. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that. Let's move on to State of the Union. Woof. Listen, I was worn out with all we did last week was State of the Union.
Yeah.
Months and months of State of the Union. So we're a little more lighthearted today than I'm not going to say the F word. I'm not going to talk about any of the things we talked about last week. Okay.
NIL is out. Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. There's a really interesting article inside Higher Ed, which is about how to build 8-week college terms. My theme for State of the Union today is just thinking about new things.
Innovative.
You remember the season's about Redbud. So it's like, how do we take some broken things and see glimmers of hope in them?
It's good.
This article is really, really helpful actually to read through. Let me give you, they have rationale or kind of the process for how you can do 8-week courses, but let me give you the rationale for it and why it's worth investing in. Okay. First of all, their guidance is you're not taking a 16-week course and mushing it into 8 weeks, because that's miserable, as you can attest to.
Oh, I'll tell you what's worse. Taking a 16-week course and mushing it into 1 month in study abroad. That was brutal.
For everyone.
For everyone. I don't know why I did it.
Yeah. So they're like, hey, what's actually nice about 8-week courses is that you can have a more concentrated learning goal. So if you think about your typical course, you break it in half. You're like, this half, we're going to talk about this 8 weeks. This half, we're going to talk about this. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, it really addresses a lot of needs for students' flexibility, right? So if they start the course and they're not doing well, they can sort of restart sooner instead of being like, sorry, you have to wait till the spring to take that. You have these rolling courses where they can kind of recover if they need to. And also, there's a lot of research that says if students take fewer than 12 hours in a semester, their completion rate for those classes is lower than if they're taking 12 or more. Now, obviously, there's a limit to that. Like, we don't want them to take 24, but having that be something that you're focusing on, that you have some structure and that sort of thing, I think makes a lot of sense. So if you're interested in that, that's a great article that kind of will lay out some ways to create those courses. Also in the news, I think this story about St. Joseph in Indiana is a really, really interesting case study on schools that are like, hey, we need to do a trajectory change, and we're going to do some things that are really unheard of in the industry. Okay. So St. Joseph College is a Catholic institution. It's in Indiana. It's in a very rural location where like the next closest community college is more than an hour away. 7 years ago, they suspended their operations and they lost their accreditation. And were having tons of financial troubles. They were $27 million in debt. Their enrollment had declined to about 900 students in 2017 from the peak of 1,500 in 1960. So just like all the changes that we see oftentimes on a campus. Well, this campus has reinvented itself as a hub for short-term workforce training in their small city in northwestern Indiana. So they have adjunct faculty who are teaching, and they're offering a huge range of certificate programs, including healthcare fields, veterinary sciences, and a newly launched commercial driver's license program. Tuition for these certifications ranges from $500 to $2,000. And the longest certificate program is 16 weeks, and that's to become a veterinary assistant. Wow. So they're still unaccredited, which means that their students can't get federal money to take those classes. But St. Joseph's is like, it's okay. It's not super expensive. People can save an investment of $1,000 to then have the certification where you can go work is totally worth it, right? And they're partnering with one of our schools, Bethel in Minnesota. Bethel is providing all of the necessary accredited classes for students in St. Joseph. So they're kind of piggybacking off of that. What's really fun about this story is that the community is like, this iteration of this school is what fits our local community needs. So many schools are acting like they're in big cities, but they're not. And the people around here need this kind of education for now, right? So I think it's such a bold move. People are like, hey, are you going to get accredited? And St. Joseph's is like, I don't think so. We would like for our sort of, not accreditation, but like our stamp of approval to come from how many students take our classes and then pass their test or their certification to get whatever they need. That's how you know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're not going to mess with accreditation right now. It's not important. So I love that story. It's super brave, I think. And of course, there are some people who are grieving, right? Because they're like, that's not the St. Joseph that I graduated from.
Right.
But the leadership is like, sorry, it's don't exist at all. Or we have to have a different manifestation of what it means to serve this community. So super cool.
What I love about that is their recognition of their impact in their region, right? And so how do we add value to these communities? So it's not just our self-preservation, but how can we continue to stay true to making an impact in this area?
And Matt, don't you think so many times there is this rat race of like, somebody should tell us what it looks like to be a successful school, and then everybody has to try to be that, as opposed to like, where are we? Who do we serve? What are the students that we're getting? Okay, then how do we become a great place for those students, right? Instead of like, this is the standard everyone should have. So it's a great story. This is an article you and I had a little bit of disagreement about. So I'm just going to challenge everybody to go read it. It's in Christianity Today, and it's called More Christian Colleges Will Close. Can they finish well? It is 100% written from the perspective of faculty and colleges closing. So this article is basically like, hey, because of the cycle of academics and the rhythm of the academic year, it's really not cool to be like, sorry, we're closing in 2 weeks, or we're closing at the end of the semester even, because it takes faculty out of the sort of rhythm of hiring, right? Like positions are posted in fall and then sometimes in spring. They're afraid that faculty are going to quit if you say you're closing, students aren't going to come, right? There's just that whole piece of how do we treat our faculty well, which I think is a good conversation to have. It is not from the perspective of students saying in 2 years we're going to close, or in 2 years we're going to close these departments, right? Because then students are like, I'm not going to stay, I'm not going to apply, I'm not going to come. And you may, if you're in financial difficulty, that then just becomes this boulder, right? Which is hard to stop. Yeah. So I think it's a good discussion. I think it's pretty interesting to read it and think about, for sure, for faculty and staff. And Matt, you know, I have said forever, I hate to say it, but it's true. If you have people who are quitting in higher education in August, they are unhappy with their school, right? Because the rhythm is we finish.
Everyone knows the rhythm.
You quit, and then you have all summer to find a position, and then August starts and we're locked in. And we are seeing a lot of people who August 20th are like, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice, I'm done. So it's a pretty interesting, I'm sure there are other industries that have that kind of rhythm. Like we talk a lot about hospitality, right? And there's a busy season of hospitality, and then it kind of, you know, tapers off after the summer. But it's pretty interesting to think about that impact on our schools. Okay, I have 2 more for you. One is an article in Inside Higher Ed where the professor for a certain school asked their students to create the AI policies for the class. I think this is such a great approach to this, right? So she is like, hey, you guys, I want you to do research around ethical uses of technology, ethical and unethical uses of technology. And then we're going to come to a consensus in this class about what our policy for AI is. And what I think is so interesting about it is that there are some common things. So she did this in a spring class and a summer class. In both classes, all the students said you should not use AI to plagiarize, okay? But students in the spring semester determined that it was okay to use AI to brainstorm a paper, but only if there were, if you were by yourself, like in your room. If there are people around, you have to use the people in order to brainstorm. And then the other class was like, yeah, no, you can use it whenever, it doesn't matter. So even that piece, right? The conversation of like, let's not use fake people if there are real people. You can use fake people when you're by yourself, but when you're in a place where there are other people you can talk to and learn from, you should do that instead of asking something like that. So I think it's really, really interesting. Things like differences in whether or not AI should help you organize your paper, help you do your outline. But the teacher was like, it's such good conversation about good rules around this. And it's like you and I said last week, right? It's like giving students an iPhone without rules, they make up their own. And in this case, it's like a guided study of AI, right? Like, well, let's talk about why we would do that. So
it reminds me of like in res halls when they say, hey, you need to write your own contract with your roommate. So going through that process where you're having to talk to each other and really settle out like, this is really important to me, it's not important to you, and be able to have that conversation. So being able to talk through as a class about how we want to use AI. Yeah. What I really love about it is they're setting up the rules that they then will want to be consistent and follow. Yeah. And they're going to hold each other more accountable than if you as a professor just handed it to them and said, this is my policy.
And it's a really important negotiation, right? Because if something is very important to you, if you're like, I don't think you should use this to brainstorm if there are other people, then you need to be able to clearly present your case for this is why that's important, and do some good convincing, right, of your classmates. So
it's good.
Did you have more to add to that?
Oh, I just would love to have those 2 different classes come together and hear them talk about the 2 different approaches and their experience going through that class.
Yeah, it's a great idea. All right. The last one I have for you is, it comes out of Indiana University. I should know this because my parents lived there. Indiana University in Bloomington. They have a whole center for teaching excellence. And they have created a Who's in the Class form. It's a survey that you can use online. Here's the link to it if you're interested in using it. So it's an anonymous survey that faculty are giving in their class early in the semester, just to say like, who's in our classes. It comes out of their, it's like equity. It's not equity and inclusion. It's like accessibility comes out of accessibility. Like, how can we make sure that everything that we have is available to the people who need it, the students who need it? So this survey, and I'm just going to run through a couple of these questions, but they say, okay, students, yes or no? I work on or off campus, and the number of hours I work per week is. I play on a varsity athletics team at this institution. I live off campus, and my commute time is X. I'm over 25. I'm on active duty or a veteran. Just those 5 questions, knowing that in your class and being able to show everyone else would be so helpful to be like, we have assumptions about who's in this class that may or may not be correct, right? And then as you have that in different classes, being able to say that about an institution, I think is so smart. A couple more. I have a mobile device with Wi-Fi capability. I have a laptop or desktop computer I can use for work. I'm financially capable of purchasing all the materials needed for this class. Even just those things, right? Understanding how your students are showing up in your class, which Matt, you and I and Sherry also talked about this with COVID, right? How shocking it was. How many students were like, I don't have a computer. I don't have Wi-Fi. I
Right.
am insecure. So
Right.
I love places where we're all sure we know.
Right.
And then someone's like, why don't you ask? And then you find out, wow, we actually have no idea what's going on. So I love that. I think it would be such a good, in a class, but then on the campus, it would just be so helpful to be able to tell the story of your students on your campus, right?
I would love to give faculty that and say, complete this about your students. What
Yeah.
percentage of your students do you think have these characteristics? And then just to see the gap between the reality and this anecdotal, what faculty think, who they think they're teaching.
And Matt, don't you think there's something about just being asked the question as a student, just that somebody would say, how long do you have to commute to campus? I commute 45 minutes. Thanks for asking. No one's ever asked that before. Just by asking the question, it makes me feel like, oh, that is an important part of my experience, right? There is some difficulty in that.
It's nice to ask. It's even better to then get a response from providing that information, right? Like, hey, so being able to know that, but then showing empathy, having solutions, helping those students that's where you can really make an impact.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that is the State of the Union, much less depressing than last week. I'm a 7 Enneagram, so I had to bring a little light.
Sunshine on a cloudy day.
A little sunshine today, for sure.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So I'm going to welcome my next guest, who I don't really think of you as a guest. Sherry, sorry. Is that rude? I don't mean to be a bad host. I just get to hang out with my friend. It's really nice. Dr. Sherry Woosley, who is my research guru, all of the questions, and also your encyclopedia knowledge of literature and research is always super helpful. I'm like, I'm thinking about this thing. And you're like, these articles, Rachel, go read these articles. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So listen, let me just take you on the trip of my brain. Okay. I want us to talk about relationship-rich education. We've talked about this book before. I think it's super, super helpful. But if I'm being honest, I have been a little snotty about this book because I'm like, is anybody actually confused that education is about relationships and that what we should be doing is getting students connected with the right people, peers, faculty, staff? Obviously, this is the way we need to go, right? So somebody wrote a book about it. I'm glad. But do we really need to talk about this? And then this article in the Chronicle came out today, which is called College Feels So Transactional to Many Students. Who or What is to Blame? Which I was like, well, holy smokes. I guess some people are really confused about why we need relationships. So this article lays down for us this juxtaposition of a transactional college experience where students have chosen to go to college because they want a job, right? Super extrinsically motivated. They want grades so that they can get a job. And these schools are pushing to treat students like consumers. So it's like, but I paid for this grade. The faculty in this article are like, I hate the end of the semester because my inbox is full of, can I have a better grade? Is there anything you can do for me? Right. So it's setting up this idea that students are coming to college for a very, very transactional experience. And at the same time, what we're talking about today, which is the best parts of college, whether we're talking about academics or we're talking about student life, the best parts of college are relational. And maybe students don't know what they need from a college. And so they're coming, this article says the most often requested activity on campuses that this author looked at was Netflix. That's the activity they want. Can we have Netflix on our campus? And the author is like, that's not what we're talking about. So I don't know, Sherry. I mean, as you're thinking about intrinsic motivation, curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Wondering and learning, thinking about all of your things about like purpose and autonomy and challenge and all of those things. It just seems like the right starting point for a relationship, rich education is, what is the value of higher education? What is it going to be?
You know, I was thinking about this sort of even when you kind of thought about the topic, because we are fundamentally based on this idea, and I mentioned this to you, that you take the smartest, most expert, knowledgeable people, you put them in a room, and then you put a class with them, and they will transfer that knowledge.
Right.
That's also transactional. It's not as transactional as I need an A or I need a resume, a job, but that's also transactional.
For sure.
And I had really, really hoped that we learned during the pandemic that transactional isn't the value. It's not watching the video that makes a college education, right? Like, it's not sitting online getting the information. It's learning how to learn and reflect and engage and interact and really think deeply. And we don't do that as a passive audience.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we learned that lesson. And I, like, do you remember leading up to the pandemic, everybody was talking about, oh, the future is online, and everybody hated it. So I was like, okay, we've learned the fact that it's not online. Maybe we didn't.
No, I don't think so. And it's such a good point. I was thinking about, I have a professor now where I read the textbook and I was like, I do not understand anything that this textbook just told me. You know, those textbooks where you're like, and then I listened to her lecture. She had 3 lectures recorded and I was like, oh, she's a great teacher. Now I understand that piece, right? But that is not transformational to me. Now I understand, now I have some facts, but if I don't have engagement with her as a person, it's just, I've learned a new thing, right? Versus being in a space together and me saying, that makes me think this, and you saying, well, that makes me think this. And then us sort of, even like this AI policy, like coming together and really learning about why is that important to you. It's so interesting, the difference between, you can be a good teacher, but if you don't have that relational connection, it's like, that was 3 hours of a lecture I listened to. Thank you for helping me understand that. It doesn't change me.
The other thing I think is, if you think about where we are positioned in society right now, I don't necessarily need the information transfer. It won't help me 5 years from now when I need a whole different set of information. Yeah. I need the relationships. I need to know how to think deeply, interact with people. I need a completely different skill set. And so I think if you see college as just a means to a job, and I shouldn't say just, I mean, that's huge. And for some people, that is like the difference between where I am and where I want to go. That's huge. But I better develop some skills and relationships to carry me beyond that first job,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
right. That's exactly
yeah.
right. This article has a quote that I really love. It's basically, instead of teaching our students that they should go to college for a job and careers and that transactional piece, colleges should focus on what students need. Having interviewed dozens of students for this project, the author has a better understanding of what it looks like. They are craving advice, mentorship, and relationships. They don't always know that, but that is why they are here. They really want those relationships and role models. And if college doesn't have that, instead, if it's like, do your homework and I'll give you an 85, students are going to ask why they're paying for that. I just think that is so, that idea that you have 18-year-olds who would somehow have the self-awareness to come to college and say, I need advice, I need mentorship. They're not. So we have to create that for them and say, this is what you're hungry for, right? This is why you've come, because it's going to be a great experience.
I also think that we do a disservice by saying, or even implying, that college gets you a job. Because let's be real, what gets you a job and what makes an employer happy is also not the A's.
No.
So learning the people skills and having the mentor to continue to talk to and to grow with, that is what makes you successful in the job. So I don't think it's we get you a job or we don't get you a job. We get you a job or we get you relationships. It's both.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the way you best at those jobs is those relationships, is those communication skills that you learn through that. I still stay in touch with people I taught 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
It's so interesting because we have a hardship because we've lost our message, I think, right? And sometimes I feel like we're on the seesaw of like, we need to do a value. The reason you're paying for this is because, yes, you have higher income. Yes, it opens the door for jobs. Yes, we need to have that value proposition. But I think sometimes in our haste to press on that, we forget this other piece, which is, I mean, the stories I tell about college are not about what I learned in the classroom. That doesn't have, they are about my teachers who invested in me, right? They are about my peers who I walked through those 4 years with, but they're not about like, and then I learned this concrete thing, and that's why I've been successful. So it is a very hard negotiation. And Sherry, I said to you earlier, and I mean this as a real question, like I want to go talk to faculty and say, how do you define your job?
Yeah.
Because I think about 100 years ago, what faculty were expected to do, exactly as you said. Like, I have all of the knowledge and I'm going to transfer it to you. That's my job. And then good luck. Versus where we are now, which is like, I can go listen to 700 lectures on this subject. Mm-hmm. That is not your job. It would be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Yeah. Well, and even have we set up their jobs in a way that they can do the things you're talking about?
Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, if you're focused on research, right? If that's where your tenure and promotion comes from, then that's what you're going to do. That's your focus.
Or if you have 250 students a semester, you can't have 250 deep, meaningful relationships a semester. No. Well, if you can, I'd be super impressed.
You're a superstar if you can do that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's definitely not an introvert, right?
Oh gosh, no. I was thinking about grade negotiation, and obviously in a class of 250, you can't do this, but it's really interesting to think about, why is it at the end of the semester we're negotiating grades? That should be a thing that we're talking about all through the semester. If we're really in relationship with each other, when you get a C on your first test, come see me. What can we do? Because I'm nervous about this path that you've started out on, right? Versus you don't know me, you don't know anything about me, and now you're going to send me an email and say, hey, can I have a C because I don't want to fail your class, right? It's like, well, you have now. So what are we going to do about it? So, okay. So all of that is preamble to relationship constellations, which
I think you did make up this word, by the way.
you do.
I think you did, because I remember showing you social network analysis,
Yes.
which I've done for 20 some years, and I had done it with a group lately, and you immediately jumped on the word constellations, which I loved. And the reason I loved it is because when I first started studying social network analysis 25 years ago, God, that makes me old. Sorry. But like, that was before Facebook and before all the things. And so now when you say social network, people immediately go Facebook, and it's not. And so I'm watching the field because I'm seeing people do things, and people are talking about organizational network analysis. And I'm also watching IT people sort of go, oh, well, networks. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. When you said constellations, I was like, oh, maybe that should be the word.
Yeah. And you, Sherry, when we talked about this a month or so ago, I was saying our students have to have this complicated constellation of people who are watching them from different angles, right?
Yeah.
And are giving them different things. So faculty don't want to be counselors, and res life staff doesn't want to be the tutor or whatever that looks like. And then you were like, yeah, but it's not just this constellation. It is that then every star in that constellation is also connected to their own constellation, connected to their own. And so it's exponential.
Yeah.
It's that when I pull you into my constellation, now all of a sudden you have tripled your network because I have people I'm connected to. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, well, let me back up a little bit, because I remember when I first saw network analysis, it was, you know how, like, okay, so let me give you like an example of thinking, and then we'll go to the analysis part. But like when you walk into a new group and there's 6 or 7 people, and you kind of look around the group and you're like, okay, since this group is new to me, but they are there, who am I gonna connect with? Who should I pay attention to? Who should I whatever? And I don't know about you. This is just the way I think. I look around and I see who knows everybody, who talks to everybody, right? Like who's the person, right? Or people. And so that's always how I've approached new environments, is I look for the people that have lots of connections. And when you get to network analysis, it's where you actually visually and mathematically measure, but you don't just measure what's immediately around the one person. And once you start measuring the bigger piece, you start to see that direct connections are one thing, but they're not enough to understand what's happening or who's powerful or all of this stuff. So I did my low tech version. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, low tech. Every one of these little constellations has 6 people. And if you think of the lines as the connections, every one of those constellations looks really, really different. And you actually know something about those 6 just from my goofy little drawings.
Yeah, for sure.
You know that this one in the middle, that's the person to be friends with, because they're connected to everybody. But you also know that if you want any information to get through from anybody to anybody, it's got to go through that person.
Right. It's a lot of power, right? There's a lot of power there.
One of the things to think about for you, like as you think about retention, if this is the friend group and that middle person goes, what happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you wonder, sorry, I just want to say one more thing about that, because you wonder then about basically then all of those 5 people are alone now, right? It's not like they have a place to come. It's like, no, now they're totally unanchored, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've seen groups like this, imagine spreading them out, but you've also seen groups where everybody's connected. So they don't rely on anybody else to get information. If this person's having trouble, they can tell one person and suddenly everybody's going to jump and help. right? Like
Right.
maybe good, bad ways. Everybody's there, right? The
Yeah.
information's there. But then you also have these. Now, this is the one to me that we often see in organizations that are really hierarchical. Imagine this is a hierarchy. This person's at the top, they pass information down. But look at the telephone chain.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very interesting. And there's only one place to
And
get
then
your
you also
information.
have these kinds of organizations. By the way, I could hundreds.
Sorry, go ahead, Sherry.
Yes. And then there's like organizations like this where you have kind of little micro groups, right? Or cliques or cliques or whatever, that triads. But you also have two really important people that connect those two groups.
Yeah.
So, okay, keep in
It's
mind,
very
you
complicated.
know nothing about these people. But you know nothing about these people. You don't know who's the official leader, who's the unofficial leader, but yet you know a lot about how those groups function because you recognize them.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, that's the power of network stuff. I can see relationships and go, oh, if one person in that little clique goes, that whole clique is at risk, but maybe not the others. Like, yeah.
It's so
All right. So
interesting.
did I just mess with you or what? Tell me what you're
No,
thinking.
it's so interesting to think about. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, yes, you did kind of blow my mind a little bit. I was thinking about how fun it would be just to sit in a freshman, right? Because part of the reason we're talking about this right now is because the statistics are like 60% of students say they met their primary faculty or staff member in the first year of their college. It's like 75% their primary peer relationship in the first year of college, right? So one of the reasons we're talking about it right now is because you have freshmen who have been on campus for a week or two, and all of these little, it's like your neuron pathways, right? All of these are getting mapped everywhere. And just thinking about sitting in the freshman res hall and just watching who comes in with who goes out by themselves, how does that start to coalesce so that you could have a really good understanding. And we would say the most at-risk students are the ones where we either don't see them because they're not leaving, or they're by themselves all the time, right?
And I would say there's a third group, at least I've read a few studies on it, which is if you're in a little group and one person goes, that little group is now at risk because you've sort of destabilized the group at some level. So, and if you think about even retention policies, you don't have to do everybody. If you got one going, you better look at those right around them. By the way, I was talking to this guy, Alex Furman, I think. He's got a company and he's doing the same thing around employees. If one employee goes, whoever's tightly linked to them is now at risk.
Yeah. Sherry, you're the one who was talking about, like, in higher education, who's pressuring you to leave, right? And it was like your colleagues who have left to go somewhere else, they're the ones who are like, come on, it's going to be great. You should try this, right?
Yeah. Well, that, and they've also raised the visibility of leaving as an option and maybe as a potentially successful option for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like transfer students, right? Once a student knows how to transfer, they're like, oh, I'm fluent in transferring. I kind of know how to do it now. It's not this kind of barrier there. Okay. I have a question for you. You said that you've always approached group gatherings by trying to find the person who's most connected. Where does that come from? Because I have literally never done that in my life.
Really? That's just me?
Yes, that's you. So how did you, where do you think that comes from?
I don't know, but I will tell you, I've done it my entire life. We moved all the time when I was a kid. And so you walk into a new classroom, everybody knows everybody, and you sort of look around and you have to get the lay of the land fast because whoever you sit by at lunch that first day could decide your whole year.
These are things we don't want to tell our kids, but they're true, right?
You look around and you look around for the markers that look familiar and comfortable, but you also look around for who's connected and who knows how this works and who knows the systems and the stuff, right? I don't mean to say that you find the most connected and that's your best friend, because sometimes you look at them and you go, oh no, I don't want to be with that one.
Yeah. But Sherry, that is such a good example of that is something that you learned when you were younger, but I don't think everybody has that. And I'm thinking about talking to our freshmen about what is your gift in making friends, right? Sometimes, like, I know my daughter, she's going to be the one who just goes and says, hi, I have never met you before. Tell me about, like, that is going to be her giftedness. And my giftedness would be finding a person like that and being like, I need to be close to you because you're going to meet all the people. Yeah, exactly.
Finding the one who knows how to work the room, because that's not my skill set. Yes.
Yeah. So just thinking about that conversation with freshmen right now, when we're saying you don't have to be the one who goes up to a person you haven't met, but you do have to develop some competencies in terms of being in a place where you could run into people or finding a person who's able to really easily make friends. Matt and I were talking about this earlier. And I mean, for both of us, we have a person. When I was in grad school, I was sitting on the top row in my class of 24 people with my head down, like, I don't want to meet anyone. And my friend Faith walked in the door, looked at me, came up and sat right next to me. And I was like, what is wrong with you? I'm giving off my vibes of like, leave me alone. And she was like, no, we're going to be friends. And every friend I have in my master's program was because she was like, you stick with me. We're going to know everybody, right? So helpful to have those conversations with freshmen.
I love that. I wrote recently on LinkedIn about a concept from social network analysis called between. The between people, the betweeners. And I think this is critical. And I think it's a really useful concept to learn, see, recognize, and also be. And I sit between other people. I sit between other groups. I become the conduit for them. And I recognize who sits between my department and another department. Who are those friends that make that connection? It may not be the leaders. It may be the front line who end up sitting at a table at whatever and now have lunch all the time. Who are the betweeners? Even on a student community on a floor, who's the one who connects the north side to the south side? Yeah. Who are the friends? Sometimes they're the relationship couple that connects the one group of friends with another group of friends. And then once you have that concept and start spotting it, and I would say, okay, let's be honest, you and Matt and I are betweeners for our two organizations.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I connect you to these people and you connect me to those people. I think once you learn to recognize betweenness and recognize the power of it, I think you will also should develop some skills about making those communications for people. So for me, it becomes bragging about my people to other people I know, because I'm the betweener passing the information.
Yeah.
I'm the betweener who makes the introductions. I'm the betweener who tells you how wonderful somebody is so that when you have a situation, you know you want them. So betweenness is a fabulous concept to think through.
We're always talking about adulting, but I'm like, this is the kind of adulting lesson I need, right? To be like, here's how you, we've talked before about being super connectors, about saying like, you should know this person. And I'm going to tell you why, because this is what they do. And you should know this person because they're incredible and they do these things. But also, I think what you just hit on is why retention is so hard, not from a student perspective, but from a system perspective, right? Because depending on your structure and whether you have academics on one side and student development on the other, if you don't have the power of being a betweener, then you can only motivate one half of the student experience, right? You can only say, here's what we're going to do in academics, or here's what we're going to do in student development. And the hardship with being the retention person is that it's everything. It's the whole system, right? So you can't just be like, Oh, well, I report to the provost, so I don't know what Res Life does. Nope, can't do that for retention.
And
So
and I'm
it
not
makes
saying well, I'm not saying the retention person has to be the betweener, but they should know who the betweeners are.
yeah, for sure.
Because there's always some who maybe they worked orientation together and they know each other. And so but know who they are so that if you have to get over there, you know who can help you.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because it is this sort of back channel underground work that you have to do, right? To be able to really understand what's going on. And then there's the second, so that's the level of professionally. And then there's the second level of how do we know what is true for students? How do we uncover those quiet students who aren't going to raise their hand about things or really are alone or are connected to somebody who is not conducive to their success, right, on a campus. You have a great question that you taught me years ago, which is to say to a student, who would celebrate with you on this campus? Yeah. Which I really love because it's like, if you want to quickly get to a center point for a student's relationship constellation, who they want to go and tell a good thing has happened to them is an awesome question to ask. Yeah. And if the answer is no one, that's a thing that we've got to figure out.
Or if the only answer is my folks back home, that means my only safe space is those folks back home. Do you know what that fits in with, which I didn't know when we talked about it last, is the theories on bragging.
Tell me about
bragging that. Bragging is an interesting social construct because we know from most of the research, bragging is not necessarily effective, right? It can come off as braggadocious and know-it-all, whatever. So people have all these strategies for how to humble brag and all the stuff, right? Yeah. But there is a type of bragging that is, I share an important thing with somebody who I'm in a tighter relationship with, and they celebrate with me. And that is that level of bragging with that person who then celebrates is a relationship builder. And if I don't do that with somebody who thinks they're close with me and they hear about it somewhere else, it actually hurts the relationship. So I think it's a great question, even more so now, because if as a student, I don't think I have anybody and other people think that they are my friends and I don't tell them good stuff, I could actually hurt those relationships.
Yeah, that's
wow. Great. We both learned something new. I love that.
So good. It reminds me of Brene Brown. You know, she talks about teaching her kids what kind of people they want to be around. And she says, you have to think of everybody like a candle, and you want to be around people who, when your candle is shining very, very brightly, they celebrate with you. They're like, oh my gosh, you're doing an amazing job. Not every friend is like that, right? And then she also says, when your candle is very dim, you want to be around people who are very protective, who aren't going to blow it out, are going to be like, it's okay, we're just going to wait, and then it's going to shine brighter pretty soon, which I think is such a great illustration of this idea of bragging. But I've never thought about how the withholding of telling you good things does communicate to you we're not as close as you maybe think we are.
Well, could you imagine, like, if you had something big, awesome happen and I found out about it somewhere else and we talked recently, I'd be like, why didn't Rachel tell me?
Rude. What is wrong with you? Yeah, for sure. Again, that is a great conversation to have with freshmen, to say, listen, we want to teach you. One of the ways that you express closeness is you tell people good things that have happened to you. I really love that. Okay, there's one more thing that I want to fit in before we're done, and that is, I'm going to tell you what I find happens often, and then you give me your insight into it, okay? So a lot of times when we're talking about relationships with students, there is a person, bless their heart, who feels like they have to be at the center of every student's relationship constellation. And so when we do things like get referrals or whatever, they're like, okay, give those to me. I will go and I will find the student and I will manage the situation. And so often I'm like, first of all, you're going to get burnout. You can't do it. You cannot, if you have a robust way to identify students who are struggling, one person cannot carry the load for every student, right? But also, every student hopefully does have this constellation of people where we don't have to inject or change that. We actually could just get the right information to the right people because they're already doing the work. They're already mentoring them. They're coaching them. They're meeting with them. They see them in the res hall. Yeah. It's a really hard shift to say, we want to find the best person for the student, and it's not necessarily me.
Right. How's that? Right.
It's just such a heavy load. And I appreciate it because people feel responsible. They're like, I have this information. What do I need to do? But I'm preaching all the time. You give it to the person who's already there. You make sure the right person has that information. Thinking about your drawings, I mean, that's a really great example of like, this thing exists and you're a planet. You're all the way over there. We don't have to put you into that thing. We can just say, hey, let this group take care of what they need to do, right?
Is it that we need to start people to understand that they're the backup, not the primary?
Yeah, because, part of what we say is if you look at a student's relationship constellation and they don't have one, you're on. That's you, right?
Or if the primary group fails.
Yeah.
Because somebody else left or they're,
Yeah. Or needs coaching to say like, hey, this is how I would handle that. Here's what I think. Okay. Well, I think we probably could do another 4 hours on relationship constellation. Two things though, that I want to kind of call out. And the first one is the exponential web of those constellations. When you think of you're connected to me and therefore you're connected to all of my people because I'm a betweener for us, right? And then I'm connected to you and now I'm connected to all of your people. That's the kind of thing we want to do for our students. When a student comes and asks me something, what they've gained access to is this whole constellation of people that I can say, okay, well, you should ask Bailey about that. And Z's going to take care of that for you. And Sean is going to help you with this. And that is a really different way, I think, of understanding why students need to be connected to faculty and staff, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah. You get all my friends too.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Okay, I want to read you this quote from this book, and I'm such a softie, so I'm gonna try to read it without crying. But it is so beautiful that I was like, here's another image for us to think about in terms of our group of people. Okay. So this scholar of mentoring in higher education uses the metaphor of a tree to illustrate what a community of mentoring is really about. Ecologists tell us that a tree planted in a clearing of an old forest will grow more successfully than one planted in an open field. The reason, it seems, is that the roots of the forest tree are able to follow the intricate pathways created by former trees and thus embed themselves more deeply. Indeed, over time, the roots of many trees may actually graft themselves to one another, creating an interdependent mat of life hidden beneath the Earth's surface. This literally enables stronger trees to share their resources with the weaker, so the whole forest becomes healthier. Similarly, we human beings thrive best when we grow in the presence of those who have gone before. Isn't that lovely?
I love that. Well, it's just the notion that you don't have to tread the path yourself and figure it out yourself. You've got resources and people, and I love that.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom, and you just think of people like clearing the way for you, right? Stick with me. We're going to clear the way for you. So really great. All right, friends, always good to spend time with you. Thank you so much for joining me. I think next week we're doing cap and gown. I'm actually going to be in Austin, so that will be very exciting. But always good to spend time with you.
You too. Thanks for having me. I'll see you next month.
All right. Sounds good. Bye.